In this lesson, we will discuss how the built environment affects the health and safety of the human body. How the temperature feels inside a building is based on more factors than the number that's read on the thermostat. The season, the humidity level, air movement, and any heat that may be radiating off other objects. As our body operates necessary functions for sustaining life, it creates heat. Have you ever noticed how a cold and empty airplane feels, or how hot and stuffy crowded rooms may get? This is because of body heat. The average person at rest gives off the same amount of heat as a 70-watt incandescent light bulb. This rises to 100 watts when sitting at a desk, 200 watts when walking, and up to 870 watts when exercising. As designers of interior spaces, our goal is to create environments where people are neither too hot nor too cold to function comfortably and efficiently. The surplus heat in our bodies is passed to the environment in 4 ways. Through convection, which is air molecules absorbing heat from the body; conduction, where heat is transferred through direct contact with cooler surfaces; radiation, where heat radiates to cooler surfaces without any physical contact; and evaporation, where heat is drawn from the body's surface to provide energy to turn liquid water into water vapor. In addition to thermal comfort, we must also consider visual and acoustic comfort. Visual comfort applies not only to stunning views and beautiful interiors, but also providing adequate light and avoiding glare. Interior designers should avoid strong contrasts that make vision difficult or painful, such as very bright objects against very dark backgrounds, or a dark object against a light background. Lighting levels and daylight contrast are important parts of interior design. Interiors should also be planned to provide acoustic comfort, allowing for audible privacy as well as reduced echoing. Other considerations for designing structures that accommodate the human body are water supply for drinking, washing, and carrying away waste; ventilation, which provides for clean air to breathe and the removal of airborne toxins; smooth floor surfaces and appropriate space planning that allows for unobstructed and safe travel through the structure; and designs that help suppress or prevent fire and provide safe escape routes from a burning building. Many of these factors are so important to health and human safety that the government regulates them through the enforcement of building codes. It's important to note that building codes establish minimum accessible building practices. Adopted in 2002, the International Building Code by the International Code Council is a model building code, meaning that other building codes use it as a model, which attempts to join the various jurisdictions in standard regulations. It's very important for you as a designer to keep current on code requirements. Some states have statewide codes based on the IBC, the model code, while others have local codes. Sometimes both state and local codes will cover an area. Not every jurisdiction will update their codes on a regular basis, which means that some jurisdictions might be using codes from 2002, while others could be using them from 2010. And an interior designer needs to check then with the local jurisdiction to determine which codes to follow. Sometimes codes are changed. They're published usually annually. And professional organizations and government agencies will offer continuing education programs when major code changes are introduced. The federal government buildings and facilities are not subject to local code, but rather codes that are issued by the federal government. Now, typically, though, if the codes in a local jurisdiction are more stringent than the government code, the federal government code, they will comply with the local code. So again, if you're working on a federal project, you need to check with them and find out which codes they are going to use in this particular project. In addition to building codes, there are also electrical, mechanical, and plumbing codes. Usually you as an interior designer does not deal with these codes, but they could sometimes apply. One situation is when determining how many toilets you need in a commercial facility based on occupancy and building size. Plans examiners are a code official who checks plans and construction documents and drawings at both the beginning and final permit review stages of a project. They'll check for code standard and compliance, and they'll work very closely with the contractor and the designer and the architect of the project. Building codes will cite various standards that have been developed by government agencies, trade associations, or various standard writing organizations. One of these is the NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association. They were formed in 1896, and they developed the Life Safety Code and the National Electric Code, both which help provide guidelines for fire safety. They pertain to everything from fire suppression, detection, and means of building egress in case of a fire. ASTM, the American Society for Testing and Materials, began in 1898, and they ensure the quality of various materials in the construction industry. UL, or Underwriters Laboratories, test products, systems, and materials and how they relate to human health and safety. Then they publish this information on a list. Some codes will require that you use specific UL approved items. And what you see here in this image is what the material or the product will have. And it'll have this symbol, the UL trademark. It'll read listed, and then it'll have a control number or a file number so that you can verify that. ANSI, the American National Standards Institute, started in 1918, and it not only organizes and authorizes the various standards that are created by organizations like UL or ASTM, but they also provided the basis for the Americans with Disabilities Act. Now, in some cases, the Congress will pass a law which will supersede all state and local codes, and one of these situations is the Americans with Disabilities Act. This was a civil rights act authorized by Congress in 1990, and it protects individuals with disabilities from being fired inappropriately. It gives them access to all state and government services, public accommodations, commercial facilities, and telecommunication services. The term accessible when used in building codes refers to handicap accessibility as required by the ADA. So you hear a lot of talk when in our industry, in the interior design industry, about making a building accessible, or is the restroom accessible, or an accessible bathroom stall. That means that this particular environment is accessible by somebody in a wheelchair. So aspects of ADA that affect building design, because I mentioned that some of it refers to employment, other things refer to telecommunication, but there are several aspects that do affect what we do as interior designers. And so to make it easier for us to understand that, they've created the ADAAG, the Americans with Disabilities Act Accessibility Guidelines. And there's all kinds of different books published that give you these diagrams with all the dimensions and things that you need to know when designing a facility. This is the most important aspect of the NCIDQ exam. Okay, so that's it for this week's material. Now you may post your journal entry and write down 3 questions you have about what was covered in the 3 videos that you just watched. Be sure to read the sections in your text and take notes, not just from these videos, but also from your text, because the quiz in class will pertain to both.